Hello guys and welcome to my guide for the battle for dazar'alor Fury Warrior. My name is Squiggle and I'm going to be showing you guys the ins and outs of playing a Fury Warrior in 8.1. In this video I'm going to be going over numerous things that are going to make us very potent in the current raid tier as well as mythic class, including what we are looking like on the logs, what fights we are strong on, what stats and build to go for, including talents, and of course I'm going to also show you guys what sort of weak auras and macros that I use in order to enhance my gameplay. So without further ado, here is my guide and enjoy. So first off, we are going to go over what we do look like in logs. Now to start with, I want to say that this is completely a range dominated tier. And then after this, I really do strongly think that the Rogue and Demon Hunter are simply very strong right now. Not going to say that they're overpowered, I just feel like they are very strong melee. However, there are two very noteworthy things that the Fury Warrior bring to a raid comp. So the main thing that the Fury Warrior is brought for in a lot of these kills is a battle shout. A lot of these fights in the battle for dazar'alor at the top end, apart from Jaina, the tanks are actually required to be blood DKs or monks or something similar to these. And for this reason, bringing a Fury Warrior is actually going to be the only way that you can bring the AP buff to your whole raid at certain times. On top of this, I will also add that Fury Warrior has decent execute, and this makes it very strong for a lot of progression scenarios, especially if you are lusting later on into the fight, even sub 20% for some sort of raid comp. And last but not least, I really do feel like the Fury Warrior needs a little bit of a tweak when it comes to the survivability bracket. So obviously Fury Warriors, they do have the insane self-healing that they gain from their Bloodthirst. On prog, sometimes I'll go up to 5 to 6k HPS just using my Bloodthirst alone. However, I feel like the Enrage regeneration needs a much lower cooldown in order to bring this up to par with the Rogues and the DHs. So right now, we want to have a quick look at what sort of traits we want to be running on the Fury Warrior. Now to start off with, we can see that Reckless Flurry is the one that stacks up the best, up to 3 times. Now obviously this is because the Reckless Flurry does a flat amount of reduction and extra damage per rank that you get. For this reason, you want to be stacking this to 3 times if possible. After this, we are going to have a look at our best one-of trait of all of them. This is going to be Unbridled Ferocity, and for all situations you want to be running at least one of these. The reason for this is you get 8% chance of recklessness for 4 seconds whenever you use your rampage. After this, the extra damage that you get is the only thing that is going to stack per rank that you get, so you can see that the damage is pretty minuscule when you compare it to a better trait. After this, we're going to see that Cold Steel Hot Blood is going to be quite good for the first trait, as well as the Simmering Rage. So for these reasons, you want to make sure that you are only running one of these traits maximum. After this, the Treacherous Covenant is going to be insanely good for our single target, and if you guys can get anything like a Blightborn Infusion, a Battlefield Precision, or a Champion of Azeroth, these can really boost your single target and AoE damage. So if I were to pick a best in slot sort of setup, I would probably go for 3 Reckless Flurry, 1 Unbridled Ferocity, 1 Cold Steel Hot Blood, and then 1 Simmering Rage. Now of course the drawback from Treacherous Covenant, in my opinion, is too big to make it valid and to warrant it a spot in the best list. And if you do go under 50% health at any time, then this is going to be less than optimal. So now we are going to have a brief look at what sort of trinkets that we want to go on the Fury Warrior. Now to start off with, the Syringe of Bloodborne Infirmity is absolutely crazy. I was lucky enough to pick myself up a 385 version of this with a socket, so therefore this is going to be something that will stick with me for quite a long time indeed. After this, I want to also mention that the best in slot trinket from anything you can do in Mythic Plus will be the Gore Crusted Butcher's Block. For this reason, I am trying to do as many Waycrest mana as I can on my warrior. However, to my dismay, I have not been able to pick one of these up past 370. So obviously in the current raid tier, the best trinket is going to be the Everchill Anchor. However, you guys can see how this lines up with all of the trinkets from Mythic Plus and PvP, and see that this is quite a low ranking trinket. Therefore, the main thing that we want to do to get the best in slot trinkets are going to be old content, and these Mythic Plus dungeons. So next up, like I was saying, from the Mythic Plus dungeons, we want to be running the Vial of Animated Blood and the Rizan's Gleaming Eye. My best from the Mythic Plus setup, in my opinion, would be the Gore Crusted Butcher's block tied in with the Vial of Animated Blood. Now, one thing that I will also add is that for every point of Reckless Flurry you have, the Vial of Animated Blood is going to be slightly untimed with your Recklessness. So for this reason, if you are running the Reckless Flurry, the Vial of Animated Blood is going to be pushed down the list somewhat. So next up, I'm briefly going to show us what sort of talents we want to be running for the Fury Warrior. Now to start off with, the main one on this line that is going to be strong will be the Endless Rage. War Machine used to be very good for killing stuff and getting a lot of rage from it. However, I recommend Endless Rage for pretty much all situations now, especially because when we use our Bloodthirst, it is going to cause us to enrage most of the time, and for this reason, it is going to give us consistency in gaining our rage and really getting out a lot of rampages. After this, for PvE, I recommend that you guys run double time, apart from times when you need to use your Storm Bolt for say Mythic Plus or single target stuns in raid, or I recommend if you run the Impending Victory. Now, Impending Victory can actually be quite good in certain scenarios for allowing you to gain a little bit of health back. It really does sometimes help the warrior with gaining back this health that it is losing at other times during the fight, especially because of being enraged. However, most of the time I am going to run double time, especially because it just helps me stick on a target, and it allows me to generate rage for doing mechanics and, you know, getting out for mechanics and all that jazz. After this, Sudden Death is going to be our talent to go for in this line. Sudden Death essentially just gives you free executes all of the time, and if this pairs up with your Recklessness window, it can be extremely powerful and just give you a shit ton of rage that you would otherwise not have. I will also say that Furious Slash is also good. However, it is not as good as Sudden Death, Single Target, or AoE. And in a rage, it does need a little bit more tuning in order to bring it up to par. Next up, Warpaint. This is what we are going to run about 90% of the time. There are times when I would go Bounding Stride if I was feeling kind of risky, and if I feel like we were on farm kills and the healers didn't really need me to run the Warpaint. However, Warpaint really does mitigate a lot of damage, and it does help since we are in a huge uptime of our enrage window. Next up, we have Carnage. Carnage is going to be the best in this line, as it is pretty much just going to allow us to pump out a lot more rampages in our rotation, and it is going to make them do more damage. This is pretty much a rampage build that we are running at the moment on the warrior, and essentially getting out as many rampages as possible is going to be the key to high DPS. Next up, Dragon's Roar is going to be best for most situations. I would recommend Bladestorm in AoE situations or 1 minute ad intervals such as Opulence. Opulence, this is really good to actually run Bladestorm, especially if you do have the Ruby, as it allows you to stack up the Ruby on these things AoE to help you nuke them down a little bit faster. And like I said, it really does help with the fight timing. Last but not least, we have Siegebreaker. Now Siegebreaker is going to be used most of the time. Heavy AoE, there are going to be times when you use Anger Management. However, Anger Management is simply a lot better for arms and for protection, simply because it reduces a lot more things. If Anger Management reduced the cooldown of a lot more abilities, then I would recommend running it over Siegebreaker for AoE situations. However, for 1 to 4 targets, I would 100% recommend Siegebreaker for all situations. So now we are going to have a quick look at our sim on the Fury Warrior. Now to start off with, I want to say that this sim is using the Vial, like I talked about earlier. It is not using a very good Trinket setup, and the Azerite traits aren't that great either. However, it is what I have. This is currently my best simming set, and I have to make do with it pretty much. So to start off with, we are going to have weapon DPS and offhand weapon DPS. I currently have a 405 and a 400 weapon, and I have coined every single mythic boss that I have encountered and killed. Unfortunately, it is not enough to warrant me a 415 plus weapon, so I'm dealing with something that is going to reduce my DPS in turn. After this, the haste is going to be our best stat. Haste is rather breakpointy. There is going to be a point where your mastery and your critical strike are going to outweigh your haste. However, I have not reached that point yet, so I'm completely just going haste, which is also very good because haste seems to be the best end slot stat for protection, fury, and arms at the same time. After this, mastery is going to be very strong, followed closely by critical strike. Now, hot steel, cold blood is going to increase the value of our critical strike, and it is going to put our bloodthirst up in priority in our rotation. However, the mastery is always just going to be something that scales exponentially as the expansion goes on. So if you are in doubt, just go for the mastery, especially if you don't know if you are going to drop this trait for maybe a reckless flurry or something like that. After this, versatility is going to be closely behind. It is going to be just a flat damage increase. However, as your gear goes up and you are in the recklessness and enrage windows more often, then the mastery is going to eventually outscale the versatility. And last but not least, we are going to see that strength is our last one at 2.16 scaling, and this pretty much means that you want to be going for secondary stats over your primary stat of strength. So first off, I'm going to go over what we are doing for our rotation and our opener. So off the bat, we are going to use our pre-pot, and then we are going to go in with a siege breaker. This is assuming that you have this talent taken. After this, we pretty much want to be using our bloodthirst over our raging blow, and then we want to be using our rampage before we reach 100 rage. Make sure that you are not capping rage and that you are keeping it under 100, otherwise you're going to potentially be losing out on damage. So essentially our opener is going to be quite variable. We're going to have certain times when we want to use our Dragon's Roar straight after we use our first rampage, and we want to make sure that we are using our hard hitting abilities and our rage generating abilities when we are inside the recklessness window. Of course, if you are inside a recklessness window and you do get a sudden death proc, make sure that you dump your rage and then you use this sudden death proc instantly, as with this up you are going to generate a maximum of 40 rage, which is insane. That's like halfway to a rampage right there. So essentially what we are trying to do is get as many rampages into our rotation as possible, and we are trying to maintain a high rage uptime with our bloodthirst and trying to keep as many of our abilities on cooldown as possible. So right now you can see that I am trying to micromanage what I'm doing with my trinket. I'm waiting for my trinket to come up until I use my recklessness, and then I'm going to go in with the siege breaker and try to pump out as much stuff as I can in this window as possible. You see there I get my execute proc there as well, which allows me to pump out a total of like 5 or 6 rampages inside one recklessness, which is insanely big for the DPS of the class. After this, the other thing that I wanted to exclaim is how easy this class is when it comes to AoE situations. So pretty much the only thing that you need to do when you are doing AoE is you want to be adding in your whirlwind into your single target rotation. So pretty much you can see these two here are going to be quite close together. The main way that you can see that they are close together is if you are getting the dots coming up on both targets after you use your whirlwinds. So pretty much here I'm using my whirlwind in between every second GCD and making sure that I'm using my Dragon's Roar whenever it is up in order to maximize my damage. So right here you can see when the target gets low, I'm going to be spamming my executes, and the execute is going to be our highest priority whenever it gets to below 20%, especially because this is going to give us extra damage, but it is also going to give us extra rage, which is going to go towards more rampages. So it feels like quite a smooth playstyle at the end of it. So that just about wraps up my guide for the Fury Warrior in 8.1, the Battle for dazar'alor. If you guys have any questions, make sure to ask in the comments down below. My Twitch is sort of a bit inactive at the moment, so I'm not going to link my Twitch this time. However, in the next couple of months when my internet gets upgraded, hopefully I can be on there to show you guys some gameplay live and to answer all of your guys' questions, as I know that that is very important, just having someone to discuss it with bit by bit, you know, just pick my brain on the whole thing. If you guys like this video, make sure to thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to my channel for more warrior gameplay as well as other classes that I've been playing over the last few months. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you next time.